and I should be on. You should be able to see me, but for some reason it's not saying that you are, and it's not coming up on my phone. So I am going to keep trying this. I don't know what to do from here, to be honest with you. It says my white mic is working, the camera's working, everything else should be working, but I don't seem to be live. So, I will figure that out separately. Welcome to my world and to tech. So, since I don't seem to be live, I'm going to put another message in the chat, just in case you are getting it. I'm saying I will post this as a separate recording later. I don't know what's going on, and I apologize. So, let's assume that you'll be watching this at a later date, and you will accept the fact that this is how my life works. So, please and thank you. Okay, so, this week, I want to talk about the first of several of my favorite tools. And this is beyond your rotary cutter and that kind of a thing. These are extras that I like. I often go into people's sewing rooms, and they have tons and tons and tons of equipment, most of which they never use. A lot of it they don't know how to use, and they don't even know why they got it in the first place. And they think that sometimes you have to have these really special things in order to make the pretty quilt that they want to make. So let's just start with the concept that there's really not a whole lot of stuff that you really need in order to make a beautiful quilt. Because if you think about it, back in the day, all they had was a pair of scissors or a knife, thread, needle, fabric. That was it. Sometimes they had templates that they made in paper. Sometimes they'd use a block of wood. There's all kinds of different ways to make an impression to make sure your blocks are all the same size. And there was a ton of fudge factor involved. So let's start with the idea that you don't really need a whole lot of anything. But there are some tools that I have found have made my life a lot easier. So the one I'm going to talk about today is my favorite, and it's quite simple. It's painter's tape. I know a lot of people have done videos on painter's tape. So let's talk about it. There is regular masking tape, like this, and it comes in all kinds of different colors. And then there's painter's tape, like this, that comes in blue, green, and a couple of other colors. You can get it in purple, and there's a couple of other colors it comes in. This one is still in the wrapper because this is the first roll that I've had to buy in years. I use it quite a bit, but I use such small amounts that it doesn't really add up to a whole lot in the course of events. So I'll walk you through some of my favorite ways to use it. I'm going to put my glasses on because I made notes so I didn't forget anything, because I knew I was coming right from a client. I came home, I showered, I grabbed a bite to eat, and I'm here. So probably as this goes on, you're going to see my hair get fluffier as it dries. Sorry, that's just how my life is going right now. I'm just completely jammed up. So, okay. So the first one that I want to talk about is from Karen Brown from Just Get It Done Quilts. And I thought this was brilliant. It didn't quite work right for me the way she does it. But my machine is different, and that's probably why. So I'm going to switch cameras. So this is a replacement for all of those cameras that were giving me trouble the other day, the last couple weeks, and now we have this one. So what she does, here we go. Let me turn on my machine so it adds more light. There we go. She takes masking tape or blue painter's tape. I'm going to use the painter's tape. And she makes a ledge. Now, I had used painter's tape in the past to put a guideline for my sewing on the bed of my machine. Okay, the first time it's always hard because finding the end can be, there we go. Okay, so on my machine, hold on, let me get you a better view. Hopefully you can see it here. No, this is my son's camera actually, that I am using because we've been having so much trouble with mine. Okay, there we go. So for my 1/4 inch, it's right here. So it goes across this plate and then just shy of halfway into here where my feed dogs are. So if it was on this side, it would be like right in the middle here. And so I would run a piece of tape along so that I could use it as a guide. But the thing that I really love about the way that Karen does it is she explains it that, you know, your attention can wander and that one piece of tape may not be enough to help you when you're kind of spacing a little bit. So this is what she does. She takes several lengths of blue tape, or green, or whatever color. So let's do just like 3 for this example. Okay, and then she lays them down. Now, I would actually recommend they be a lot longer than this, but I'm trying to get it all on the board here so you can see a little bit better. And then so she lines it up. So I'm lining up the left side here. Okay, hopefully you can see it. There you go. And then, I don't remember if she cuts hers or not. I have found that if I take my paper scissors, which are over here in the drawer right next to me, I will trim it up, but I do it at a little bit of an angle, like this. The reason being that I want it to go as close as I can to my feed dogs. Alright, so let me change the angle here a little bit more. Without going actually in the groove. So now I'm going to line this up. Now these marks actually shift as this cover goes on and off. So I've learned I just aim for the middle of my gap here. And you put this down, and then when you're feeding fabric through, it runs right along the ledge here, and you're less likely to have that wobble as your fabric moves back and forth because you run it right along the ledge. Now here's my problem. This plate has to come on and off every time I want to change the bobbin. So I have been known to cut the tape here and then have it in front and in back, and then I can remove my plate and change my bobbin and then put the tape back, make sure it's aligned, and then keep sewing. So that's number 1. And I'm going to be using this a little bit later, so you can actually see that more in action. Okay? So that's my number 1 thing that I've been doing with it lately. But I've also found that for me, well, those of you who know me or will ever get to know me will know that I am a natural born klutz. If I have to walk across a room carrying 2 things, I'm likely to drop at least 1 unless I'm working. For some reason, when I'm working with clients and their stuff, I don't drop it. I think it's my attention to and focus in that moment versus if I'm just, you know, heading somewhere in my own home, I don't pay as much attention. That's probably it. I need to fix that. But realistically, I do tend to drop things, or just I'll be so tired when I'm taking the items down to iron them or bringing them back or whatever that I might stack them wrong. I might put them back, in the wrong order. So I use blue painter's tape to mark my blocks. Now, on YouTube, I've seen other people who do this, and they say never, never, never iron over the painter's tape because it can leave a residue in the fabric. Honestly, it has never been a problem for me. I've ironed them a million times, but I would never do it with anything that wasn't 100% cotton, and I would never do it for anything that I was worried about it later. So, for example, if I was doing a quilt for show or something like that, I would never iron over the painter's tape. Some of you have seen this quilt. Let me get up and I'll show you. Oops, I lost my mic. Hold on 1 second, I'll be right back. I was doing this one as part of a class that I took. And the idea was that you assembled your quilt in quarters, and then you put these flowers on. You can see here. And you allowed the flower to go off the quarter and onto the next one so that you'd get a continuous look. So what I did when I was assembling these blocks, this is quarter A, and this one is quarter B. Now, how do I know that this is B? Because I have along this top row these little blue painter tape stickies, B1, B2, B3, B4. Okay, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I went until I had all 12. Is it 12 or 16 in this one? It's 16 in this one. So if I dropped these and messed up somehow, I could always double check. Was I sewing block 1 to block 2? The letter and number, make sure I always have them facing the same direction so they're both pointed up. So B1 and B2, this is the orientation I wanted because they're both written so that the B's are at the top. And then I had a little chart that I made so I would know that there was A1 through 4, B1 through 4, you know. And so as it went, I could make sure that I had everything lined up. And I've done this with a ton of quilts. If you go on to the StashBlasterQuilts.com site, some of my other quilt patterns are there. There's the red one, the red and white one that's radiating half square triangles. I believe it's called Up or Down. And then there's the orange quilt, orange and white, that's Orange You're Glad to See Me. Both of those have a lot of pieces, and so I assembled them in groupings so that I would know what I was doing, and then I could, once I had them on the wall and I decided how I wanted them to lay out, I just numbered each block, and then as they got sewn together, I took the tape off. I always left the one in the left-hand side. So in this case, if I had sewn B1 together and B2 and then 3 to 4, then if I was going to remove any of them, I would remove B2 so that 2 goes to 3, etc., etc. You don't ever have to remove them. That's fine. But I did find that after a while, having so many of them all over the place, it kind of distracted me. So I did better if I removed them on a complicated layout. Or just a large layout. Because like I've mentioned before on this show, I work a lot of hours as a professional organizer. And at nights now I've been doing a lot as well because I'm doing virtual appointments. So when I get to sew, sometimes I'm not at my sharpest. So I need to make sure that I'm going to be accomplishing what I need to accomplish and to do it in a very smart, efficient way. So another thing that I do is if I do a test block, I use the painter's tape and I tape the block. Actually, when I'm not doing live streams, it's right on the monitor that I have in front of me. Now my monitor is on a swing arm, so I can actually push it almost, well, I can actually rotate it all the way around, but I push it halfway if at 90 degrees from here if I need to access something directly in front of me, or if I want to put up a large thing that I want to be able to see from my sewing machine. And if I don't, then it sits right here and I can have on like a video, or I can put my patterns up, or this is where when I have time I edit my videos. So it's really handy to have that pattern right behind me, I mean right in front of me, so that when I'm assembling the blocks later in a assembly line style, I could still be double checking that everything is oriented properly because I've got the pattern right in front of me. So that's the next one. Let me see, what did I think after that? Okay, so I do use blue painter's tape a lot to mark rulers. Okay, So there's a couple of different ways. When I'm doing, let's say I'm doing a lot of cutting, okay? I don't always necessarily want to have to count over how far something is going before I can actually do the cutting. Okay, like I said, tired, let's reduce the number of mistakes. Just like on this, these got cut at 6 inches instead of at 6.5 because I grabbed the wrong ruler. Stupid mistake, but it happens. So what I will do if I'm doing something like, I'm just cutting squares, let's say, and I'm doing all of one size for a quilt. We'll be dealing with those later. Okay, let's say I wanted to do 2 7/8. Why 2 7/8? Because if you are doing half square triangles and don't want to have to square up later, then you have to do the 7/8. Generally, I would do the 3 and then I square it up and trim it down all at the same time, but that's me. But let's pick an odd size. So let's do 2 7/8. This piece of tape I just put right on the top, right on that line. Yep. See, now I'm off because of the angle I'm doing this at. Because I'm trying to do it so you can see and I can see at the same time. Okay. So 2 7/8 right there. And then I'll do 2 7/8 right there. And then I can simply line this up. Now this piece won't be the right size, but you'll get the idea. I can take this and then simply line up the tape on the fabric and then trim. Okay? Now, another thing that you could do, if you wanted to, would be to build this up on the bottom side of your ruler. If you put it on the bottom side, one thing that you can do is use it as a stop on the fabric. So if, let's say this was on the bottom and was 2 or 3 layers thick, I could use it and move it until it touched the fabric, and it would naturally stop that way. So it would give me a little bit of a resistance, so I would know I was there, and then I could cut the other 2 sides. There's a lot of people that do that. It works great. I do this a lot if I'm doing, so for example, I teach how to trim up flying geese if you don't have one of the specialty rulers, and I use the painter's tape to align that center point to make sure that when I'm trimming, I'm going to be trimming things the correct size while still giving myself that 1/4 inch seam allowance that I need to make the loop, the cross seam line up properly. So that's another place that I would do that and seriously consider that. It's just a double check as well for when you're tired. So after that, let me see. Now obviously I can use painter's tape to put 2 pieces of a pattern together. You can also tape your junction between 2 pieces to make sure that it's going to line up properly when you're sewing the 2 things together. That does mean that you will get some glue on your needle, but you could, instead of pinning, you could tape over your intersection. If you were doing, let's say, a 4 patch and you got it lined up so they're all nested up, you could put a piece of tape over and then stitch, and you don't get the hump from a needle, and you wouldn't have to remove that before it got underneath the feed dogs, because you have to remove a needle obviously to make sure you don't hit it. If you hit the tape, it doesn't matter. So that is another way that you can sew a little bit flatter and have a little bit more control. I really wouldn't do it with a 4 patch, but if I was doing, let's say, a 6 or 8 pointed star, in the middle you've got all of those seams coming together. Adding the bulk of the pins doesn't help your situation. So there have been a couple of times when I have taped the intersection more than I have pinned, just because it'll be flat. It goes through. It also helps hold down all of those seams that want to curl up underneath your feed dogs when you're taking that many through your machine. Everything's nice and neat and flat, and it just whoop, whoop, whoop straight through, and you're good. So you can do that, and that's a different thing you can use the paper tape for. I have seen people who use the tape. If you get the 1/4 inch tape, you could put that on the diagonal of a square if you're doing the 2 half square triangle method, where you are sewing on one side of the diagonal line and then on the other side of the diagonal line. So I have seen some people who will put 2 pieces of masking tape that are 1/4 inch, where it lines up, where the 2 pieces abut each other, but that's right down that center line, and then they stitch right next to the tape rather than drawing. I don't know that you would save very much time doing that, but if you're particularly concerned about the pen marks or ink transfer, it is a way that you could do it so that you don't have to mark that at all. It would work particularly well if you were doing a lot of dark to medium half square triangles where your pen wouldn't show very well. Of course, you can use like a white pencil, but those don't always work very well either. The paper tape, especially if you get a bright color, that would be easy to follow. Now, a lot of people also use the painter's tape as a guide for quilting. And there's 2 ways you can do that. You can do one of 2 things, basically. Let me show you. So we're going to imagine that this piece needs to be quilted. I know it's white on white. I apologize. I mean white on the white background. But let's say you want to quilt this, and I have 1 inch painter's tape here. If I took this painter's tape and I put it on, let's say I want to do an odd angle like this. Okay? And this is my quilt. I didn't realize that was off camera that much. Okay, here we go. I could do this all over the quilt and then sew on both sides of the tape, either directly next to the tape if I want this to be 1 inch apart, or my preference is to sew with this along the foot of my machine, on the edge of my machine, so my needle's actually in here. That would mean I wouldn't be sewing with a 1 inch grid. This gives you your measurement for 1 inch, but it also means I never go through the tape, so I don't have to worry about gumming up my needle. If you're not worried about it being exactly 1 inch, then you could go slightly off, but you're going to get a little wonkier stitching line. So you could put this tape on and do it either right next to the tape, or you have your foot go right next to the tape and you have your needle off to the side. The nice thing about that is you can then, let's say I've stitched on this line, and I'm just going to draw this with pencil just to make it a little bit clearer. Okay, so I'm going to use a 1/4 inch, although that's not what my foot is, but a lot of you are going to be working with a 1/4 inch foot. Okay, so this line is where I've stitched. Okay, so if I take this tape up, now you can trim it to fit the block, or if you're doing a whole quilt, just lay it across and let it go into other blocks. It doesn't really matter. If you're doing the whole quilt, then when you get to the edges, trim it off. But then I can take this tape back again, and I can line it up with that stitching line, right? And then when I sew, the 1/4 inch will happen again. Okay. My distance here is 1 1/4 inches. When I do it again, it'll be another 1 1/4 inches. Do it again, it'll be another 1 1/4 inches. You can get painter's tapes in tons of different sizes. So you could make this as wide or as narrow as you'd like. And then you remove the tape, and your stitching lines are in there perfectly. They're parallel, they're they're parallel, they're all the same distance apart. There's no marking that needed to be done, because remember, these marks are your stitching line, it's not really pencil. And it's fast. So there's a lot of good reasons to do it that way. Now, another use for my painter's tape is if I'm going to a retreat or a class, I label my gear. I can't tell you how many people are going to be at it with the same piece of equipment. And whichever brand you have, you're not going to be the only one with it. And especially for a class where they tell you need like a 6.5 inch ruler, everybody has the same exact size. And probably half have one brand or another, so that it'd be very easy to get them mixed up. The advantage, to using the paper tape, the painter's tape, to label your stuff is it's almost a guarantee when I pre-label stuff, I need the measurement under the tape. I don't know why. It just happens. But this, it's easy to pull off, reposition, stick down where you don't need it, and you're ready to rock and roll. Okay? So everything, scissors, your sewing box, your mat, your rulers, all of that. Anything anybody might ask to borrow pretty much gets my name put on it. And it's not because I don't want to share. It's because I do want to be able to share. And I just want to make sure I get it back, because rulers are not cheap. Cutting mats are not cheap. Rotary cutters, definitely not cheap. Especially with fresh blades, which I always have in my rotary cutter when I go to an event like that, like a workshop or a class. So I don't want to lose that. Everything gets painter's tape, labels on it. Quick and easy to deal with, not a problem. Okay? All right, what's next on my gravy train here? Of course, you can do things like use your old pieces, the ones that you've used for other things, and get lint off from around your machine. Use it to get the lint and stuff off the front of your quilt. I do that a lot. So right now I'm just taking it and I'm running it along the top of my machine because I realized it is dusty. I've also labeled, I don't know if I can get this over there where you can see it. Probably not, but let me try. Okay, this little piece of blue tape, it says cleaned and the date, 3/17/21. So that tells me the last time I got my machine cleaned, because I know that there's times I've used a machine for a short period of time and not gotten it cleaned, but that's not a problem. And then there's some machines that I have no idea when I last had it cleaned. So this year I had every machine in my stable cleaned, oiled, checked, the whole 9 yards. And so I took 2 a week for over a month. I have a lot of machines. And I had them all cleaned and serviced. And so I know that they're all working, but I wouldn't remember later when I did that. So they all have a painter's tape label right on the top where I can see at any given time, oh, you know what? I've used this machine a lot, and it's been 6 months since I had it cleaned. I should probably consider doing it, or at least having it, going into the guts myself and taking a look. All right, not fully into the guts, but in removing the whole bobbin case thing and making sure everything got cleaned out. And if it's starting to look a little gnarly, okay, I'll take it in and have them done properly at that point. So having that little label on there can save you a lot of money if your machine burns out. So when did you have it cleaned and serviced last? I do know a bunch of people who will take their ruler. Now I'm back here. Okay. And rather than putting tape on the top, they will just roll it like this, sticky side out, of course, because that's the only purpose for rolling tape, is to have it sticky side out. Come on. Here we go. It's because I'm trying to do this for camera. And then they will put it on either the back of a ruler or a template, or if you're cutting out a template, on the ruler onto the template, whatever, and then stick it to the fabric or to their pattern or to whatever in order to do the marking. You know, if this is something really complex, or it's a specialty ruler like a 20-degree ruler, it's easy to have it shift if you're, concerned about it. And when you're trying to hold something that narrow down, and you've traced on this line, now you're trying to trace right here, it can be tough. Whereas if you put it with the tape on it, it's going to stay, and you can move it and then multiple times before the tape gives out, and have all of your markings done properly without having to fight with it. So that's another one. I think that's the last one I was planning on doing today. Yes. And we'll talk about some of my other favorite tools another time. But that's your tip for today. There's tons of uses for painter's tape. And the more you think about it, the more uses you'll find. It's inexpensive. I just got this roll. It's probably been 2 years since I got one, because I might make, let's say, 3 ledges in the course of a sewing day, and I might label 100 blocks. Still only going to be using about a yard of this stuff, and I don't remember how much is in a yard. Let me see, 60 yards. Okay, it's going to take me a long time to go through this. Now, when I'm sewing full time, it'll be faster. But, and I also don't use it for a lot of stuff like this. But still, it's not that expensive, and it lasts a very long time. It does come in various widths. So this is the 1 inch. This is the 1 1/4, I think. No, 1 1/2. Okay. But you can get it in all different sizes. So if you wanted to do that straight line quilting thing, think about, if you're going to do the foot, how much that's going to add to the width of the tape, and then just get the right size tape. You can do probably 5 quilts easily, the whole quilt, if you're doing it with this tape. And if you reuse the strips, even more. Okay? So, just as a thought. I have known people who have marked the quilt. They know how wide their whole foot is. And so then they put the next piece of tape over that 1/2 inch or whatever the foot measurement is. And then they keep doing that so that they can have the tape on the whole thing and then stitch, seam after seam after seam after seam, or quilt line after quilt line after quilt line, without having to stop and move the tape. Okay, whatever works for you. Okay, but it's a very useful product. So that's going to be it for today for the first part of this. If this is your first time, the first part of every live stream is some sort of an organizational tip, usually quilting related. If I have other organizational ideas, those usually come in later in the live stream and may or may not ever get edited out onto their own video. The rest of this is mostly us with a chance to chat and a chance to answer any questions that came in the mail, email, that kind of stuff. You can email me at mail at stashblasterquilts.com. You can also go to my website, stashblasterquilts.com, and leave me a message there, question, comments, whatever. And of course, you're more than welcome to add to the comment section here. Now, one thing that I do want to say, and so I'm not actually seeing what you're seeing. I am pulling up an email that I got that I thought I'd share with you because it really made my week. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to share it. That's my computer yelling at me that I haven't cleaned up my email. Of course, I've been home all day, so what do you expect? Okay. Where is it? It's being difficult. Oh, come on. I am sorry about this. I am going to find this though, because this made me feel so good. Nope, not there. I have a lot of email addresses, and it came in, and Scott forwarded it to me. Here it is. So this felt amazing, so I'm going to share it with you. A lady named Patricia, so I'm hoping that you're here, sent me an email. And it says, Dear Maria, found you on YouTube Saturday 10/9, watched your live stream Sunday. Your live stream from 9/15/2021 was awesome. I am 80 years old. This live stream is what I needed right now in my life. The JOT challenge, which is just one thing. Habit stacking, just get started. It's okay to have someone else quilt your quilt, decluttering. Children, her children lived in the house for 55 years. That was a very chatty day for me, and I talked on all kinds of topics. Needless to say, please continue your live streams, but please never delete your 9/15/21 live stream. Just watched it again when I started decluttering, and I'll be watching it often to keep me motivated and working towards my new goals. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Pat. I can't tell you how wonderful that made me feel. The fact that somebody reached out to me to say something so nice just felt wonderful. I am going to be taking down the 9:15 live stream at some point, but what I will do, Pat, is I will make sure that I've done the separate videos of all those different things, so you don't have to go all the way through if you want to see the just one thing or the other things with the kids stuff. So thank you so much. You made my day, my week. But ultimately it's coming down. But I'm not going to leave you hanging. I will have that information up there for you. The plan originally is that when I've done one live stream, I'll delete the last one and I'll post the organizational tip, and then I'll delete the last live stream. Because I don't want people feeling like they're not going to want to watch the whole thing, so they're not going to watch it, because these do go for an hour. So I wanted to make sure that I do the tip up front, and then some chattery kinds of stuff and telling you what's going on, doing some sewing with me. I'll show you what I'm working on. Like this, we did this one together. We'll do that during the second portion. So if you only have time to watch the beginning, then you can either watch it while it's up as a live stream, or you can see the video once that video's made. Or I do leave it up for the weeks in between, so you've got plenty of time to watch it as a live stream if you'd like. So that's kind of the theory. If you have any comments on that, whether you think it's a good idea, a bad idea, whatever, just let me know. But I was concerned that if somebody didn't want to listen to the whole thing, they might not listen to any of it. And I'd like to be able to share these tips. So the reason that there's so many stacked up right now under live stream is there just hasn't been time for me to get them edited down and to take those chunks out. And so I didn't want them to disappear completely until I had it in another version for you. So that's what's going on with that. Now, this has been, again, an insane week. The last week, the camera that aims down died. This is 2 weeks after one of my other cameras died, and I was stuck with just this one in front of me now. So my son gave me use of his camera for his live streams to use today, so you could see the stuff down on the sewing deck. So I'm going to be getting more cameras. I don't know what the problem is. We're trying to figure that out. I'm also not sure why this doesn't seem to be going live like it's supposed to be, but I will post it as soon as this is over, warts and all, and I'll mark it that it was a live stream. and ultimately it too will get edited and all of that. But it's just not working out in terms of having the time to edit it now. The organizing tends to slow down during the holidays and the beginning part of the year. It's kind of funny. People always ask me if I'm busy in January because of people making New Year's resolutions to get organized. Well, they usually are making the resolution that they are going to organize themselves. And so January tends to be a little bit slower for me unless we have a lot of estates or something like that, or moves. But it takes it like until March for most people to give up and say, well, I still need it done, but I'm not getting it done myself. So who can I call? And then they call me. So I'm hoping that if I get my slow patch like I normally do, I'll not only be able to do more sewing, but that I'll get a bunch of editing done. So that's where we stand with that. Okay, other than that, what was I thinking about? See, I've lost it already, and it's only 7:45. Okay, so I think that what I'm going to do, the other night I woke up, I had to sew. I just had to. I hadn't been at my machine for days. It was the middle of the night. I knew I didn't want to work on anything intricate, so I went to my leaders and enders box, which sits over here on my right, and I sewed all my pieces together. Now, I did have another leaders and enders box that I hadn't prepped yet. So when I prep for my formal box, oh, now I'm knocking stuff over. Hold on. Okay. So my regular leaders and enders, what I do, let me see if I can find some here. Okay. So I'll have something like this where I found some triangles in my collection of just scraps. I will often at my guild pick up the cut triangles or whatever that somebody else has done, because I know that they're going to hit the trash if I don't, and I really hate waste. But what do I do with it then? Well, I'll often just pair them up like this, and I stick a pin through them and I throw them here in my leaders and enders box. And so they're pinned together so I know what I'm doing what with. If it's something a little bit more like I'm doing 4 patches and I'm putting the two patches together and I want that intersection good, then I'll have also pinned through the intersection and then both ends. So there's usually 3 pins in those. If I was just sitting here pairing them up and sewing them, I wouldn't pin them at all. But they're going downstairs to be ironed. Then I pin them while I'm downstairs. They're coming upstairs. What if I drop them? What if they shift? I don't want to mess with that. So I just put quick pins in them and bring them up here. And so they go into this box. Now this box is just a photo box from Michaels. Not a big deal. But I also have from the Stash Blaster 2 quilt a bunch of these trimmings that I'm putting together. So these are not pinned. They don't really belong here in my Leaders and Enders box, but they're there in case I needed them while I was doing something else. Because I always want to start with leader ender of some sort. These are close enough I can find another one about the same length, stick them together, sew them together, and ultimately they're going to be in a quilt as a unit of their own. So they're just chucked in here right now. I will often have strip sets like this that are 2 or more sections that are leftovers. Now, this could be a leader and ender, but I would need to subcut it unless I have more. And if I said, okay, I want to do a blue stripe, well then I could easily sew these together and do something with it and have a 4 strip block. So these just got hauled out from my table, because I have a table on this side where I have my projects laid out that I'm working on. So depending on what kind of a mood I'm in, or my level of ability for the day, I can pull that project over. But my leaders and enders are usually sitting over here on my right, on a stool actually, that I can put my feet up on if I need to. Just in this box, just within reach. And so the other day, this had been full, and then it became empty. And so I just threw these in here for today to make it look good, but also to talk about the different things that might be in here. Now my leaders and enders, I do have a separate box that's the same size approximately for my leaders and enders that I'll want to sew with a dark thread versus a light thread. Why? Well, this one was done where I had an awful lot of blue and white pieces left at the end. So I would use a light thread on that. But the original Stash Blaster 1, because this is a variant, the original Stash Blaster 1 is done with black thread. So by having those pieces chucked into a black box, then whatever color thread I'm working with, I can put that leader and ender through and not have any worries about shadowing or the white popping out and ruining my dark look. So it's just easier to do it that way. I could have them all in the same bin and then either, if they were stacked up, divided, one side or the other. I could put in a piece of cardboard as a divider and throw them in the right side. Or I can have two boxes. And for me, I have a lot of them. So I just have two boxes. So on a day that I'm really feeling kind of ditzy, I just want to relax, bring down my blood pressure and my heart rate and all those things. If I just want to sew, but not really to think, I often go to my leaders and enders. I do have other projects that I do as well to use up scrap material and that don't require a lot of thinking. Flying geese is one. So I will often have a bunch of those prepped in whatever size. I don't care. And I'll sew them together and then they go in a bin, and then when I need flying geese, I can just pull them out. So I've had people ask me, well, that seems like a lot of work if you don't have a plan for it. That's completely true. Which is one reason why sometimes I'll trim them down, but usually I don't. Here, let me show you something else. I'm going to have to walk around my table, so hold on. I am here, not going anywhere, except for around and around and around. There's space on the back side of my sewing table so that I can get to the window on a beautiful day like today and open the window and let in some fresh air. I know that pretty soon that's going to go away and it's not going to be an option anymore. And so I want to make sure that I can open windows occasionally. So this is my half square triangle tote. Now, this might be a little scary. Warned you. This is how big it is. You can see there's some big ones on the side. But there's an awful lot of half square triangles in here. Why would I have so many half square triangles? Well, number one, I've taken those triangles that are just left by somebody else and turned them into half square triangles. I've used either the four flying goose method does not give you any half square triangles, but if I don't want four of the same, then I'll use either the rectangle method or the 2 at a time method. So in doing that, I usually do the 2 at a time actually. So let's just say that. The 2 at a time method. So if I only want one, or I need 5, or whatever, extras get thrown in there. So as you can see, they're all different sizes. These have not been trimmed, as an example. Here's some more. Okay. Now this I know for a fact that these ones came off the free table. How do I know this? I would have never purchased this pumpkin-y fabric, and that's one of the best reasons to take it. People give me scraps all the time, and a lot of it is fabric I would never buy. So the advantage to me is that it's going to force me to use stuff I wouldn't choose on my own, which means my quilts get a wider variety than they would naturally from my own, gee, I really love that fabric, selecting process. Okay? So it's a huge advantage to have that done and not have to worry about it. But the speed of quilting goes up tremendously when you already have units already made. So here I go again. My red quilt I was talking about before, I happen to have right here. This is it. Okay. Now this is a fairly small one. It's actually probably one of the smallest quilts I've made in a long time. I tend to make big ones. But you can see, hold on, there's the focal. Okay. So it's all red and white half square triangles. I didn't have to make any to make the quilt because they were already in my bin from when I wasn't worrying about it. And these all finished at 1 inch. Okay? So you can cut half square triangles down to whatever size you need. And if it's scrap anyway that you're sewing together, what difference does it make? It's now done. So if I can square it up to whatever size I want, if my square is large enough, my half square triangle is large enough, and I need little tiny ones like this, I'll cut 2 out of it. Because if your diagonal goes like this, you can cut a square at the top and a square at the bottom. Now that also means you have 2 blank squares. So you have a red, in this case you'd have a red square and a white square, and that can go in my bucket, in my drawers, excuse me, of pre-cut squares. So now I've got 2 squares for my next project pre-cut, and I have my 2 red half square triangles. So, you know, that's one of the reasons why I use leaders and enders, is I get so much done, and I don't have to think it out in advance, which is a really nice option. So, anyway. Oh, no wonder. I wondered why the this part of my microphone was trailing along behind me, and it slid out of the clip. So I'm going to put these 2 back together before I forget. Okay. Anyway, so that's the half square triangles. And so we get a whole bunch done in advance when we're tired, where we have to square it up anyway. So if it's a little bit off, you just cut it till it's right. And that makes life a lot easier. So I do half square triangles. I'll do 4 patches because they can be trimmed down at any time. I can do flying geese because they can be trimmed down to any size. I can do a V-shaped block where there's all kinds of names for it, but it's a V like this with the wings at the top to make it a square, or the corner block where it's a wedge that's bisected by the diagonal. So then you've got a wing on this side and a wing on this side to make a square. Those can all be cut down infinitely. Things like square and a square can't. So if you're going to make those, make standard sizes of those so that they trim out at 4.5 so that you can put it in any quilt where you need a 4-inch block. And so, you know, if you want to make them in advance, that's fine, but that's one you have to pay more attention to sizing on. You can't just make it at a random size and be able to use it necessarily. So anyway, so I just make a ton of them. Now, what do I do if I don't like the other materials on the free table when I pick up triangles? So I'm actually moving my ledge to the side because I'm going to actually need that next time I sew. But for what I wanted to show you here, what I do is I go to my drawers of squares. Those are strips. Where did my squares go? Here's my squares. Okay. So then I find a square that is approximately, oh, gotta put it face down. Always have to do it face down. Here we go. I'm going to line this up in the corner because that's where it counts. Okay. And I lay it out like this. Now, it is slightly off from true center. means that my seam allowance is going to be slightly under the 1/4 of an inch, but I don't care. Now, I'm going to needle down. I always like to start with a down needle. Now, I should have had a leader in here already. Why is this not staying put? Alright, let's try that. So I might get some nesting here. But, we're going to give it a whirl. I know my 1/4 of an inch is halfway through this arm of my foot. So I'm just going to use that as my stitching guide. Now, if I want to keep the pairs together, what I'll do is I'll set this aside. And then when this piece comes around again, I'll pair it up and put the second one right next to it and put it through the machine. If you don't care, just go ahead and put them through in whatever order you get them. Sometimes it's nice to have different backgrounds that go with these squares, so you might just choose to intentionally have different, in this case whites, creams, whatevers, to go with each of the different copies that I have of this, and then do the same thing with another color so that it would have a variety as well. I don't like to sew a quilt where you have mostly one of a fabric as a background or as a main color with only a few that are different, because those almost always look like it's a mistake. So my rule of thumb is if I am going to have multiple background shades, I want at least 5. 7's better, and a ton is better yet. I'd rather have 50 different shades of white in my quilt than 2, because I don't want it to look like a mistake. Now I am going to match these up, so I'm going to put the other half over here. And I would do the same thing. So these came from the free table. These white, cream, whatever you want to call them. Some people call them low value quilt colors, just because they're basically they basically read as a white, but there's some variety. These came out of my drawer over there. I have a 5-inch drawer of squares, and I did some earlier that used a 4-inch drawer of squares. So whatever it is that's a good match for the size that you have, then these are extras. These are ones that didn't pair up, by the way. So if it's not a good match, excuse me, then you can just go ahead and do this and then cut it apart and have half square triangles done. So anyway, it's 8 o'clock. Thank you so much for being here. I am going to post this, like I said. I don't know why it didn't go. The idea is that every first and third Wednesday of the month, I will be doing the live streams. And so hopefully I will see you here between 7 and 8 o'clock. And then I will get this figured out. I promise you. Like I said, I'm not sure why it didn't seem to actually post as a live. It didn't actually record as a live, but it is recording. And hopefully this will be up and we'll get this figured out. When I am in California for the convention that I'm speaking at, I'm going to try to do this from my phone in California instead of here at my studio in Virginia. So that's going to be yet another experiment. I think it's probably our best term. So come on in, watch the craziness, and we'll see how it goes, okay? But thank you all very much. Have a great week, and I will see you in a couple of weeks. Okay? Thanks. Bye-bye.